And Mr. Bonnet-Rouge, you can just let us know when you're ready to start things off.
Did Katrina step out?
Nope, I'm here, but that still doesn't mean you can make me do the prayer.
Ready to go? Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I now call the public portion of the meeting. Before I get there, I guess we can start off. We typically start off with a prayer as part of our committee meetings, and I will start off with the prayer. A Mussy Creator, we call upon you today for your guidance and blessing. We all need a supporting hand to keep us on the right path to our goals. We call upon your wisdom to show us the way to a just and fair resolution for all the people of the Northwest Territories. We ask nothing more than the simplest things life has to offer. Mussy. And we got the review and adoption of agenda, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the agenda for today is a public presentation from NWT Tourism. Following that, time permitting, a single item of confidential correspondence for in-camera consideration after. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Can I have a mover for the review, the adoption of the agenda? Mussy, Ms. Knockleby. Any declarations of conflict of interest, we can do it on an as and when, as a needed basis as we go through the meeting. We now will deal with the public portion. I now call the public portion of the meeting of the Standing Committee on Economic Development and Environment to order. My name is Ron Bonnet-Rouge, and I am the MLA for Decho and Deputy Chair of this committee. Today, committee will be receiving a presentation from NWT Tourism. Today's meeting is being live streamed on the Assembly's social media channels. I would like to remind all members and our witnesses to please direct all comments, questions, and remarks to myself as the chair, and to wait to be recognized before speaking. This is to help the meeting run smoothly. I will now ask members to introduce themselves for the record, starting with MLA Johnson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rylan Johnson, MLA for Yellowknife North.
Good afternoon, Katrina Knockleby, MLA for Great Slave.
Mr. O'Reilly.
Gavin O'Reilly, Frame Lake.
And for a brief moment there, we had MLA from Momfrey, Jane Way-Allen Armstrong. She'll probably be joining us momentarily, but she is also in attendance. I don't believe there's any other MLAs there, Mr. Clerk.
No, Mr. Chair, that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, members. I will now ask the presenters to introduce yourselves and to proceed with any opening remarks and presentations. I know the presentation is coming from NWT Tourism, but I'll just call upon ITI staff to introduce themselves. Let's see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tracy St. Dennis. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister for Industry, Tourism and Investment, and I'm also joined by Stephanie McCabe, who is our Director of Parks and Tourism. And if it pleases the Chair, I was just going to do some brief introductory remarks and hand it over to NWT Tourism.
Yes, proceed, Ms. St. Denis. Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wanted to thank committee for helping us and asking us to facilitate this meeting. It's a very important relationship between the Department of Industry, Tourism and Investment. We've had a great working relationship with NWT Tourism before COVID, during COVID, and of course now talking about post-COVID. So again, just wanted to thank the committee. Myself and Stephanie are just here to assist if needed. Otherwise, we'll just be observing, and wanted to welcome Donna-Lee DeMarc, who's the Chief Executive Officer for NWT Tourism, as well as Joel Walton, who is the Director of Marketing. So if it pleases the Chair, I will hand it over to Donna-Lee for the NWT Tourism presentation. Thank you.
Massey, Ms. St. Denis, for the introductions. Now I will now hand it over to NWT Tourism to introduce themselves and begin with your presentation. Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I'm introducing myself and Joel, he's just going to share our screen to set up the presentation. So my name is Donna-Lee DeMarc. I'm the CEO of NWT Tourism, and today with me is Joel Walton, our Marketing Director. So we're just going to get our presentation up here for everybody to see. Sorry, we're just this is the first time we've worked in telemerge, so just want to confirm that you were able to see this presentation.
We are not yet. Could you please try again to share that presentation?
You bet.
Oh my God.
Please enter the conference PIN number. Welcome to the conference.
There's a view problem maybe with the button.
Sorry, we're just looking to make sure that we can. Technical difficulties, sorry.
Thank you. This is Michael Ball. I can share from my computer in the committee room, and you can just let me know when you want to advance the slides, if that will work.
Sure, that will.
Sure. Yeah, that's a shame.
How about if you hit the share button?
No, that's different.
Okay. Okay, so he's got it up on the screen there, so we'll go from his screen.
Okay, I have trouble with that. I'm not gonna lie.
I know.
Okay.
Sorry, we're just looking to close the share screen that we do have up so that we can view what you've got there. How do we get rid of that?
I don't know.
Sorry, guys.
Donna, this is Ron. Are you in Yellowknife or Hay River?
I'm in Yellowknife, Ron.
Okay, and you're still with the old Kingland Fort from Hay River.
No, I'm now with NWT Tourism. I've been here since January.
All right, good for them.
Thanks.
It is good for us.
How about if I go?
And welcome to the GNWT. I see.
Thank you.
I can't close this. There's no button.
Sorry, guys. We're just having we can't actually see your shared screen, so that's what the difficulty is that we're having right now. The choose what to share screen is overlaid of.
Yeah, we might have to jump off this call and jump back in. I don't know how to get rid of this.
How about where you just had that closed tab?
Yeah, that's
Close window. We'll close the whole thing. I apologize. We can't. presentation overview, I'm going to just walk you really quickly through who NWT Tourism is, and then I'm going to hand it over to Joel, and he's going to walk you through the spectacular work that our marketing team does. So we can go next slide, please. And then the next one as well, please. So NWT Tourism, we're a unique organization in the tourism world in that across Canada, we are the only organization that is the industry association as well as the destination marketing organization. And also we're unique because we have a unique board of directors. If you could advance the slide, please. I'm just going to show you a quick slide, 2 slides of our this is our mission to grow the tourism industry in the Northwest Territories in order to support a strong and sustainable economy. And of course, with the goal to increase visitors and visitor spend in the Northwest Territories. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have a unique board of directors. We have 7 appointed Indigenous government representatives and 1 GNWT ex officio ITI representative, which is Tracy St. Denis. The next slide, please. And then these are our 7 elected tourism operators and 1 board appointed, who right now is Jonah Mitchell from Parks Canada. Next slide. And as I mentioned, our organization is unique in that we have an advocacy role as well as a marketing role. This slide just kind of highlights some of the things that we've done for advocacy throughout the pandemic. If there's anything that you'd like to talk about on this slide, I'd be happy to answer any questions after the presentation. Next slide, please. And this is how we're able to do the work that we do. The work that we do is made possible by partnerships, and these are some of our many partners. These are, as you can see, we've got some really fantastic partners, and they allow us to do the fantastic work that I'm going to hand over to Joel, and he's going to go through it with you and show you what we do. Next slide, please.
Great, thanks Donnelly, and thanks for making it quick. Gives me a little more time. So we've got a bit to get through. I'm going to talk very quickly and happy to answer any questions or come back to anything at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of the industry and the territory. We're made up of over 200 members. We're actually, as Donnelly mentioned, a members organisation. Next slide, please. So most of it consists of tour operators from across the Northwest Territories, but we have lots of auxiliary businesses and organisations as well. Next slide, please. Just showing some numbers. Prior to the pandemic, prior to COVID, we were on a fantastic trajectory. Tourism was growing from strength to strength. The number of operators was growing, as well as the number of visitors to the territory. Next slide, please. And the visitor spend to the territory. So we were on a great trajectory to hit the 235 million that we're targeted in the 5-year plan. Obviously, as you can see, coming into the year 2019-20, the impacts of COVID were felt. We were actually on target to hit the 214 million, but we saw the impacts of COVID in early January 2020. Next slide, please. This gives you a little bit of a breakdown of the spend by sector prior to the pandemic. So you can see, obviously, the Aurora viewing market was quite large. Business travel by far takes up the bulk of visitor spend. So this is an important consideration for us post-pandemic, looking at how people were spending money prior to the pandemic in tourism in the territory. Next slide, please. This gives you a bit of an idea of how we spend our money related to the markets in which we market. You can see the bulk of our marketing does happen in Canada to Canadians, to try and attract Canadians to the Northwest Territory. This also includes a lot of North American-based marketing, which we lump into Canada, as well as some of the Chinese marketing, which now we're directing towards Canada as well. But it gives you an idea of how we do spend internationally, and the bulk of it being in Canada and North America. Next slide, please. But what we're really here to tell you about today is the way that we market the Northwest Territories and the work that the fantastic team that we have behind us here at Northwest Territories Tourism does. Next slide, please. Marketing the Spectacular NWT is, is great fun. We have a great brand. We have an amazing brand promise. During the pandemic, we really took a hard look at this brand promise and whether it still remained true throughout the pandemic and post-pandemic, given what we knew at the time, looking in mid-2020. And really the brand is summed up in 3 words: simplicity, surprise, and awe. We added the line "Something Here Will Change You," which was a marketing campaign we were in market with at the end of the season of 2020 as the pandemic hit. But really the brand does stay strong. We do love sharing this brand, this childlike sense of wonder, and it's a great way to promote the territory, we believe. Next slide, please. And we use this brand in 4 distinct channels. Again, during the beginning of the pandemic, we took a hard look at whether these were the right places to market. And during the course of the pandemic, obviously been reflecting a lot on the different channels in which we operate while remaining in market the best way we can. The only channel that really has changed fundamentally is travel media. I'll talk on that in a little while. But you can see we do spend the bulk of our money in consumer marketing. We work with the travel trade, mostly in the international markets, to work with international partners to bring visitors to the territory. And then the MCIT, the meetings, conference and incentive travel space, which is really about business and events, conferences in the territory and attracting new conferences to the territory, which is an interesting proposition given the pandemic, obviously. Next slide, please. To sum it up in one slide, this slide really steps through sort of how we market and what we do and what our high-level goals are. We aim to keep audiences engaged. We have a strong audience, follows us on media, that's engaged with the brand. It's a small portion of Canadians and international, but we do have a good audience. We conduct this marketing through effective partnerships, as Donnelly mentioned. We're a non-government organisation, so we're funded mostly in part by the NWT, but we do work with other funding partners as well, such as Canada or Destination Canada, Indigenous Tourism Association in Canada. And the aim is to build brand ambassadorship for the Spectacular brand. We do this through content marketing, storytelling about the territory, and we focus this on target markets, both within Canada and around the world. We lead with our best, so within each sector we aim to put operators and members ahead that are ready to play in that space, trade ready, media ready, market ready operators, and we aim to engage these operators with their audiences, firstly with social media, then beyond. We're targeting a high value traveller, and what this means isn't just about the economic value, although we are targeting mostly people with household incomes over $200,000. We are looking at people that are engaged with the destination in which they're travelling. They're aware of their impact on the environment, impact on the destination, and they want to learn. They're cultural explorers, they're history buffs. These are people that we want to get into the territory of perhaps a bit more affluent, a bit more astute. That's what the research tells us, and research is a big part of how we target the right traveller to come to the territory. We call this data-driven marketing. It keeps us alive in a digital world. Next slide, please. The aim is really to meet people where they're at. So just a quick rundown of the impact of COVID. Obviously, I mentioned we were in market with a large-scale campaign. We were seeing the effects of COVID-19 in January 2020 as China was reeling from the impacts. Our Asian partners were definitely letting us know, and tourism operators in the territory were feeling the effects. We pulled out of market in March as the borders closed. We were actually down at consumer shows in Vancouver, and we're about to head to Calgary. And then after that, Montreal. So we pulled everything back, obviously. And then in April, we followed on behind Emerging Wisely and developed a thing called the Triple R framework, which I'll show shortly. We tried to stay on with social media with some very high-level messaging, and then took a very quick and hard look at the marketing plan and how we were going to approach marketing throughout a pandemic. We were lucky to be sitting at some very good tables nationally with some very good partners who had been through things like this before, in particular Toronto and SARS. So as we were looking at our plans for the pandemic, we had a lot of good partnership on which to rely. As we entered into June, phase 2 of Emerging Wisely began, and we began our staycation campaigns. The initial staycation campaigns were very well received. There was a big buy-in from a lot of operators. It has tethered off as the pandemic has gone on. And then we resumed display advertising. We relaunched on premium sites, making sure we weren't advertising next to negative news stories around COVID, things like that. And then in August, we secured $500,000 from Destination Canada, and an agreement was finalised to help aid our domestic marketing and our marketing with staycations. In September, fall staycation campaign began, and then obviously we've tried to stay the course with staycations and keeping the brand alive and audiences engaged and partners engaged during the course of the pandemic. Next slide, please. Overall, the big takeaways for us was the Triple R framework guided the work we did during the pandemic and to today. The marketing plan was looked at, our goals were looked at, our brand was looked at, our channels were looked at, and we agreed that most of what we were doing was still the right thing to be doing throughout the pandemic. Implemented staycation campaigns, which were a big success, at least initially for some operators. And the big thing is that we didn't go dark. We learned that it took brands that went dark during crises such as 9/11 or SARS 9 times longer to recover after these crises if they turned off. So we kind of strive to stay on during the COVID-19 crisis. Next slide, please. So the RRR framework, I won't spend a lot of time on this. We can come back to it if there's questions. The main thing we learned is that we kind of saw this, trajectory towards resilience. We were expected to be out of our homes into hyperlocal and regional travel, and then, traveling beyond those borders eventually to welcome international visitors. And what we actually learned was a sliding scale that we went forward and backwards along this, and it really helped guide what we were doing in each individual market, right down to the community level in the territory and all the way to our international markets, making sure our messaging matched the environment that we were marketing in. Next slide, please. The Staycation Campaign, as I mentioned, initially were a big success. There was a huge uptake. We had over 45 operators working in our first Staycation Campaign last summer, and some great work from our team here. Big shout out to Robin Williams in particular, who did a fantastic job of rallying members and getting people excited about staycation, working with local media partners. But ultimately it was, as we've seen the pandemic go on, it's a really hard environment for tourism operators to market in. There's only a finite resource. And as people were able to travel outside of the territory, we saw a big drop off in staycation engagement within NWT residents. Next slide, please. With the help of GNWT, we provided support for operators with free radio and print and social media ads. We were able to help operators market to a local audience. We worked with the regional offices to gauge the welcomeness of regions and communities around the territory in all 5 regions. To visitors, obviously there was some great success with the Staycation Campaign and the South Slave, etc. But really all this work has been really exciting for us. It was a new market. We hadn't marketed actually to residents of the NWT before. So this was new for us, and post-pandemic we see ourselves marketing to this audience again to try and build that brand ambassadorship. We obviously see the first visitors back into the territory, our family and friends, and we hope to really build that brand ambassadorship beyond the borders of the NWT post-pandemic by doing really good marketing within the territory that speaks to residents and the stories that they're telling as well. Another big part of it was working with local media partners. We had some great success working with local media, local radio, Up Here magazine. There's been some really good stories in there. Next slide, please. So to talk about some of the core marketing work that we do, one of the ways that is a good way to demonstrate how we operated during the pandemic is with display advertising. This timeless, enduring and spectacular was a way for us to shift away from the promise of something here will change you or some stronger calls to action, just asking people to click on these ads and learn more. And we took this approach in lots of different places. It was interesting as we became more targeted to these niche areas, away from the sort of what we call a pay and spray campaign, to being more targeted where our audience was looking, because we had a bit of time to think about it. It was great. We learned that people are 10 times more likely to click on these ads on the PGA leaderboard. So we learned that we have a lot of golf fans. I've often mentioned Russian food performs very well for us as well. There's interesting things we've learned about how our audience is susceptible to clicking on these ads, and that extends right down to print media and other things as well. Next slide, please. So all of this marketing with display ads and other advertising really sits atop of our marketing funnel. This is a diagram that shows sort of how we market. And the top of the funnel, if you can click to the next slide, just to zoom in a little bit. Prior to the pandemic, we really focused on the evaluation phase as our measure of success. And that was really primarily measured by the jump off to member websites or event websites, tourism operator websites. So we would really measure that jump off. During the pandemic, we realized that might not be what consumers would be doing. So we took an approach to focus on the engagement portion of our funnel. Obviously, the goal is to build that awareness and try and engage people with the content that we're putting in front of them to eventually build the desire and evaluate the trip to the territory. So this was kind of interesting as we started focusing on engagement. We've actually seen quite good success in the evaluation area, and the engagement area we've actually seen a big uptake in story content. It's now the #1 type of content on our website, and we're really building out that content to engage people so they can learn about the territory to build that desire. Next slide, please. The bottom half of this funnel really is out of our control, and this is really where our tourism operators, members, and potentially the NWT takes over, and that's the conversion phase, people booking the trip, undertaking an experience of a journey to the Northwest Territories, becoming advocates for the destination after a positive experience, and then expanding those markets. And actually, this is kind of like a loop where it's a positive feedback loop right back to the top, where you get people who visited the territory, had a great time because they've had a wonderful experience. They go back to Toronto or Ottawa or wherever they've come from, and they spread the word, expanding our word of mouth and the awareness of the territory as a whole. Next slide, please. The key resource for us in this awareness space and the engagement space is our website, Spectacular Nwt. It's a fantastic website. I've been working with this team for 2 years, and I have to say big hats off to Julie Warnock, who's steered the ship here in the digital space for a long time. And the content marketing strategy that was implemented, I think about 5 years ago, has really paid dividends. Story content's the #1 type of content on our site. It drives clicks to member listings. It also drives clicks to regional pages and community pages and events pages. And during the pandemic, we've been focusing on the analytics of our site a lot. We've seen just now a shift back to majority mobile. So we're seeing more people back out and about on their phones, where obviously during the pandemic we saw a big shift back to desktop. The goal here is to develop a lure for people to come to the territory, but it's also a planning tool. One of the things we've learned during the pandemic is that obviously people are needing trust when they go travelling again. Anyone that goes travelling can attest to the fact they're worried about what that experience is going to be like. So not only are we trying to attract people, but we're also trying to offer them information, planning tools in front of them, connecting to resources within the territory they might need to plan their trip. So we're really investing in the site in a big way in that space. Some of the ways traffic comes to our site through paid search, which I mentioned, digital ads, also AdWords. Social media is a big part of it, paid media, display and print ads, which I mentioned. Print ads are quite interesting because they're using QR codes, if you can click to the next slide. But the big source of traffic to our website is actually Google and search engine optimization. This is what we call organic traffic. And this is a really interesting space that we do, I believe, a very good job at. Using story content to attract people and meet them where they are. When someone goes onto Google and starts looking for, my ideal holiday, we want to be showing up for the sort of things they're searching for when they look for Aurora or the biggest fish in Canada or, best rivers to paddle or how can I engage with an Indigenous experience. It's really a place we've been putting a lot of work, and we've seen a 7% rise in engagement, which we measure as time on page. Next slide, please. Just a little story, a little example of how this works. We look at these analytics every month in detail, and during August, we actually saw a huge uptake on the Tuk page. And this was quite odd that we got 1,000 new clicks to the page. And after a little bit of research, we actually found we were the 5th ranking on Google, which we knew. But there was a story about this man biking from Victoria to Tuk for animal rescue. And it actually led to people reading that story, going off and getting on their computers and looking this place, Tuk that they might not have heard of, up on the internet, and we were being found for this as an attractive sort of tourism page people were clicking through. So it's very interesting to see the correlation. I'll show you another example of that shortly as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we've been investing in the planning side of things. We know that road travel and long-haul travel is a key travel trend in Canada. We're seeing that now. We saw it last summer. We're anticipating more of it next summer. RV sales and rentals were through the roof last summer. So we've had a huge focus on community pages and updating our offerings for road trip planning. We've put a lot of work in, thanks to some funding from Canada, and building out the core content that we have, working with our regional partners and our community partners to build our content that really speaks to the communities in a great way. I'd encourage you to get on there and have a look at our site. We love feedback and tell us anything that we're missing about the communities around the territory that we're trying to show people who might be travelling into the territory by road. Next slide, please. And, an example of this is the Nwt Road that opened up just recently. When Nwt is ready to welcome visitors, we've been building this content so that when people are making a road trip, perhaps to Yellowknife in the fall to see Aurora or whatever the reason, that they might see Nwt on the map there and consider it for a trip if that's what Nwt is welcoming at the time. Next slide, please. It's not all just digital, print's not dead. So we also go into market with print. These tools are really useful for consumer shows, trade shows, media shows, sharing with partners that are interested, sharing it with trade that is interested. So we develop this content for each region in different ways. It might be top 10 things to do in the South Slave. These two are example of road trip planning tools that we have out there. And then these link to digital content as well. So, the next print run of these will feature a QR code, and then people will be able to click through to those resources on the website as well. Next slide, please. One of the best ways I think we do lure and planning together and have done in the past is with our Explorer's Guide, which some of you may or may not have heard of. The Explorer's Guide is a great tool, and we've upped it a little bit this year. We've changed the name to the Spectacular Guide. We've taken the date off to give it a little bit more evergreen quality. And next slide, please. We're looking to try and build that bridge between the print, where we get this guide. Normally we put 30,000 of these guides in front of people around Canada. Obviously, post-COVID, it'll be interesting to see how we go, but we're aiming to build a bridge between the print and the digital. So everybody's now used to QR codes, and something marketers tried to use a long time ago and wasn't really uptaken very much. And now with, everyone's been down to the brew pub and scan the QR code when you go to a restaurant and you need your menu. So now everybody's used to them, and we're seeing great uptakes, and we're putting them in through this guide. And it's amazing, you can scan over this when you get to the art section. It'll take you to a video about an artist. We can put it in front of these little frames there that feature videos that you can jump into 360 immersive content. It links to story content that we can link it to operators. So we're just testing the water with the first run of the guide, but we're really excited about the potential of QR codes in there. And this guide itself, QR codes aside, it's a wonderful presentation about the territory. I can't wait for this print run to happen and us to share it widely and get feedback so we can build and make it better again. Next slide, please. There's a lot of information in there about, different rivers you can paddle, different fish species you might be able to catch, resources that will take you through to road trips, when to come and see the Aurora, lots of information. Next slide, please. And one of the things we're going into market with at the moment, really on the back of a very competitive space out there for Aurora, is that, the Northwest Territories is home to the world's best Aurora. We do have the best success rate that we know of, and we're willing to put that to the test. So we're going into market with world's best Aurora, but really our goal is, these are 2 pages down of the guide, is to go and put these things in front of people so we can become, more widely known for them. We see the same thing for fishing and paddling. Next slide, please. As we go through and people click those QR codes, come onto our website and find, the same information repeated over and over and over. And it's interesting, as we built out the page for Aurora, which was the first sort of cab off the rank, so to speak, in this space, we actually saw a huge uptake when we realized how we really needed to be marketing the Aurora. We released the page live, I think it was in October, and we saw more traffic to our Aurora page in October than we saw for the 12 months prior combined. So there is a real desire out there to see the Aurora, especially in North America. Next slide, please. But we're hoping to see the same success as we build out pages for paddling. Next slide, please. Also for fishing. Next slide, please. Oh, fishing's gone, that's right. And Indigenous tourism. So Indigenous tourism is a huge part of what we do. We believe it's inherent in marketing tourism in the Northwest Territories. We're very proud of the operators we have to market. We're very proud of the work we do with ITAC, the national partner, Indigenous Tourism Association in Canada, and building out weed content, going into media partnership, working in a space in SEO where we're actually trying to be found and trying to understand how people are researching Indigenous tourism experiences and cultural experiences in Canada and also internationally, so we can make sure we're found for these experiences, because we believe that the Northwest Territories is one of the best places in the world to have this experience, especially when you combine it with something like Aurora, fishing, paddling, whatever the draw card might be. We work in partnership at a national level with Destination Canada also in this space, but it allows us as well with these national partners to access markets that might not be primary markets for us, like the UK, where, and the Indigenous Tourism Association Canada is marketing heavily to a UK trade audience in that space. So we get to see some benefits there. Next slide, please. So to switch away from the consumer side of things and talk about the channel that has changed a little bit, in the media space, we used to work really in what was called earned media. So we'd welcome travel writers from, say, the New York Times travel writer would come up and we'd host them in the territory. They'd go out with an operator and experience the territory, and then they'd go home and write about it. We might get a few photos out of that. But because of the closed border, we weren't able to welcome earn. So we're really focusing on paid, where we're actually having to pay for what's known as advertorials and put our content in front of these audiences. We lose a lot of authenticity with those sorts of stories. Those first-person tales really have a lot more power. Also costs us a lot more money, and we don't get the photos. So it's been an interesting space that's changed. During the pandemic, we did some great work with Up Here magazine. We're really excited to be going actually for the travel issue. There's going to be 50,000 copies inserted in the Globe and Mail and Up Here, and some great marketing from the north, particularly from the Northwest Territories. So that's a really exciting publication to work with. We've also maintained some great paid partnerships with the likes of Lonely Planet, National Geographic. We've hosted FAMs virtually, where we've built 360 content, toured people around different things in the territory, and worked with media partners like CTV and others. Next slide, please. This gives you a bit of an overview. I won't spend long on this slide, but it just gives you a bit of an overview of how media really correlates. Caitlin, our media specialist here at NWT Tourism, has been doing some fantastic work maintaining relationships during the pandemic and hopefully heading to some media shows in the new year. But we see, obviously, earned media is where we want to be. Shared media is that social media space and people sharing the media that we put out there. What's known as owned media, our story content and the stuff on our website, and then where we fill the void is with paid media. So just gives you an idea of the sort of things that happen in those spaces, and happy to answer any questions on that later. Next slide, please. One of the media partnerships we've been really excited with is working with the Edmonton Oilers. In September 2020, we actually had a little bit of money that we invested into marketing to the Oilers audience. We saw obviously that Edmonton was going to be a key market post-pandemic to see some first visitor access to the territory. And we hadn't marketed to Edmonton as a primary market really before. As we went into market with that campaign, there was a huge uptake. It went really, really well for a very, very small investment. And the Oilers, in fact, loved it so much that they promised to give us the Spectacular Player of the Week all the way through the playoffs. Now, as most of you will know, the Oilers didn't make it to the Stanley Cup last year, but had they made it, we actually would have been the Spectacular Player of the Week would have been them lifting the cup, which would have been amazing. It would have cost us nothing. So we actually, they lured us back in this year, but it has been a really successful campaign. We've done it in stages because of the pandemic. And as we went into market with the first stage at the beginning of the playoffs, and we saw huge attendance in Edmonton, we've actually seen an amazing thing happen organically online. So normally our top two markets are Toronto and Calgary, are the most engaged markets when it comes to organic traffic. Now, after this campaign went into market with no other marketing really from us, we saw Edmonton overtake. They weren't even in the top 10, and they overtook Calgary as the number 2 clicks from organic traffic to the website. So pretty impressive with just the small start of that campaign. We're excited to see what we can do, when the time's right to welcome visitors back to the territory. Next slide, please. Obviously, I mentioned social media. It's a huge part of what we do. If you don't already, hashtag Spectacular Nwt, get on there and follow our Facebook, our TikTok, our Instagram. It's an interesting space. It does allow us, now that we've put a lot more of our posts in front of residents of the territory, to really see how people respond to the stuff we're putting out there in market. We're really proud of some of the ways we tell stories, but obviously it's great to get feedback. It's also a wonderful way for us to monitor what we call user-generated content and see the amazing photos that people are taking within the territory. As I mentioned before, that we don't have access to the photos from our own media projects before, but it's been really exciting for us to actually look and buy more photos from people within the territories, and video content as well. Next slide, please. There's a couple of examples. Next slide, please. I'm just going to run through these really quickly, just to give you an idea of the sort of things where people hashtag Spectacular NWT. We get to see this. We can reach out and say, hey, do you mind if we share this? Next slide, please. On our social media. And then it's sort of a really exciting way for us to get fresh content in front of people about what's going on in the territory at the time. Next slide, please. It also allows us to then, the next picture, this is an amazing photo we loved, and when we reached out to Jen Moore and said, can we actually purchase usage rights to this image so we can use it in our core marketing? She came back and said, yeah, for sure, and we actually have some video content here, would you like to see that? And then that leads to us actually getting more better content from residents as well. Next slide. So if you don't do anything else after our presentation, please get on and watch these 2 videos. The PDF that we shared, there's links in here to these 2 videos so you can jump on our YouTube and check them out. But this is the sort of content we're hoping that really inspires people to come to the territory. It was amazing when we put the Welcome to the NWT video in front of people. We were the 3rd most visited booth in Rendezvous, Canada, which is a big trade show that we attend. So we're getting that video in front of some very strong audiences. Next slide, please. We also work in developing video to assist in understanding how people can access the territory. Obviously, I won't spend a lot of time talking about conferences and events, but the business and events travel space, we develop 360 tours of some of the key conference spaces in the territory, and we're able to keep some planners engaged, and we're really hoping to welcome events back to the territory post-pandemic. Next slide, please. So I might leave assessing markets for question time if there's some markets that that the group would like to learn more about. Obviously, to say our focus is on Canada and the US, with Mexico coming in a close third. We were in Mexico in September 2019 on a trade mission, which went really, really well. It is a new primary market for us. And then we saw by March, just before the pandemic hit, we were hearing operators report back to us that all of their visitors were coming from Mexico. So there was a quick uptake. There's been a lot of engagement throughout the pandemic from the Mexican market. We're very excited to welcome some Mexican travellers to the NWT post-pandemic. Obviously, we haven't stopped marketing with partners in Asia. We pulled out of China prior to the pandemic because of Huawei. We put a lot of our funding with Chinese-speaking marketing into North America. Of our 70,000 followers on WeChat, actually 50,000 of them are in North America. So there's a huge engaged Chinese audience in North America. We continue to market with trade partners in Japan and Korea and Germany and Australia, while focusing also on language-speaking markets within North America too. Next slide, please. All of this really is done through travel trade. Big shout out to Tori Surgener, who does amazing work to keep these trade partners interested, especially over the last 2 years, as we've had to kind of dangle the carrot, so to speak. We are expecting to see a shift back to travel trade post-pandemic as people look for that trust. People will, hopefully revert back to working with travel agents. Simple, safe messaging, looking at the safe travel stamp, which we implemented, which Donnelly and the team implemented, so that we can show people that we're ready to safely accept visitors when the time comes. We've kept our sales agents in markets, working closely with them to maintain the important relationships that we do have. Also using those virtual tools that we developed for NCIT to share that with trade to help them continue to learn about the destination. And building domestic travel trade engagement, which is a new space for us. Next slide, please. We know one of the biggest challenges will be airline access. I won't speak to this too deeply other than to say we're working closely with partners in the space, and we're hoping that we can see some of these partners resume some of the flights, especially the Vancouver direct flight. We're very excited about Air North's direct flight from Toronto and Ottawa. We're working closely with Canadian North to welcome visitors out of Alberta as soon as visitation is ready to come from there. One of the big conversations in this space is obviously pre-departure testing. Someone I know that left the territory and came back for PCR tests, So there's a lot of testing involved, and access to that testing can be a real barrier to entry, and it's a big national discussion that Donnelly is having at the moment. Next slide, please. But we do have great air access considering, and we're hoping that as the demand comes back, we'll see that access come back. Next slide, please. I'll quickly just touch on this for the last couple of slides here. So just prior to the pandemic, we'd started on a research project that we worked throughout the pandemic with the GNWT on, and getting postal code data from around visitor centres, hunting and fishing guides, guides of the Explorer's Guide, getting all that postal code data, overlaying it with mobile phone data, and building a really good picture of who our audience is based on geographical distribution around the country. And we built these 5 target segments with 2 other sub-segments below it for ethnic and francophone audiences within Canada. And this gives us a really good picture of who our audience is. Next slide, please. Tells us things about media consumption, household income, the makeup of the family, the emotional quadrant, whether they're into authentic experience or they want no hassle travel. And it tells us where these people live throughout Canada and also where we can place our marketing and invest in our marketing. So we do, I mentioned it at the start of the presentation, what we call data-driven marketing. We're really honing in on this, especially post-pandemic. It's a very noisy marketplace, so putting the right messaging in front of the right person and meeting them where they are is going to be really important. But ultimately, next slide, please. We know that the most important thing is the people. There's a proverb in New Zealand where I come from. It goes, ask me what is important, and I will tell you. It is people, it is people. And for us, the story starts and ends with people. We have some wonderful people in the tourism industry, and we're really looking forward to promoting their businesses when the time's right to welcome leisure travel back to the NWT. Next slide, please. And sorry, I know I talk really fast, but there was a lot to get through. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I just really want to say I appreciate the time. And as Joel mentioned, we really appreciate feedback. So we encourage you to check out our website and read the amazing stories that are on that website. Follow us on our social channels. Make sure you use the hashtag Spectacular NWT when you post your NWT photos so that we get to see them and potentially share them. We definitely would love to hear your thoughts and have you join the movement to be an ambassador for tourism in the Northwest Territories. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We appreciate your time.
Mussy, Ms. DeMarc, and Joel for your presentation on NWT Tourism. It's very nice to know about your organization. I think very many people don't get the opportunity to have a presentation from your organization, and it's enlightening to see that you're not part of the government. I originally stated that you worked with the NWT, but that's not the case. This is an independent body representing all tourism operators in the Northwest Territories. I very much appreciate it for all the information you've provided. It was quite a bit of information to fathom, but I noticed that there's lots of questions coming from my committee members. So I will open the floor for committee questions, comments, whatever, and we'll begin with MLA Knockleby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It was really good. I really do appreciate the marketing materials. I think all of this looks really slick, and I know that Donna Lee, you have big shoes to fill now, so welcome to NWT Tourism. Kathy did a great job beforehand, and there's lots of good stuff here to build on. While this was a great presentation on where NWT Tourism is going, I think a lot of our questions are probably around more what is happening currently with tourism operators and how are they surviving during the pandemic and what NWT Tourism is doing to help them. I guess one area, maybe my first question is around supports for tourism operators. It's my understanding that a lot of the operators are not taking any salaries or paychecks for themselves in order to keep their businesses operating. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on what you're hearing from them around how they're going to survive the next winter, particularly the ones that don't have any winter activities, and what the association is doing to support them during this time. Thank you.
Let's see, MLA Knockleby. Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, MLA Knockleby. I appreciate the question. I think that, I can perhaps get Tracy to speak to this a little bit as well after I'm finished, but we've been working with our partners at CanNor and at ITI to help leverage some of the funding that we've received along with their funding to try to put funding support and supports back to our operators as much as we possibly can. What we're hearing from our operators is basically that we need to be allowed to have visitors back to the Northwest Territories again, bottom line. That's where we're at today. I'm not sure if Ms. St. Denis would like to add to that.
Ms. St. Denis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on Donnelly's comments, many of the department's programs at ITI, PREP, which is helping operators with fixed costs, and then TRIP, which is also helping with training and marketing dollars to prepare the operators when we are in a position to welcome visitors. The department has worked really closely with NWT Tourism to make sure that we've got programs that do assist the operators. So hopefully that answers the MLA's questions. But yes, we do have specific supports up to $100,000 to help cover fixed costs. Thank you.
Merci for that. Ms. Knockleby?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that answer. I guess I know those answers, but I keep asking because I'm concerned that we're going to lose more operators. So I guess I have lots of questions. So I'll just start there then, I guess, does the department or the association have an idea of how many operators that we've lost over the last couple years of the pandemic and the impact on the services that we will be able to offer? So I know it's hard to sort of quantify, but is there like a percentage in reduction that maybe either group could share with us? Thank you.
Merci, Ms. Knockleby. We'll start with Donna and then we'll switch over to Ms. St. Denis by TI.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Emily Knockleby. I'm not aware of a specific business that has actually closed to date. I am aware that there are many businesses that have had some hardship through the pandemic. We have worked with ITI to secure some funding to do an industry scan once we're ready to receive visitors again. So we'll have a really good understanding of where our businesses are at and at what level they will be able to get back to business again. So we hope to have a really good answer to that question. But as far as our members, we have more members today than we have had in the past, and I think that's a testament to the fact that they understand that there's strength in being a part of part of our organization, in that we are all working together to try to make sure that we come out of this and still have those businesses still here able to receive visitors as soon as we're able to. So I hope that helps answer some of that question.
Let's see, Ms. DeMarc. Ms. Denis, do you have any comments to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just add that the department is again looking at assisting operators with the waiving of tourism licensing fees. So we will get a better indication as we have applications coming in this winter. I'd agree with Ms. DeMarc that we haven't seen a decrease, but again, we will be monitoring as TOL applications come in and doing what we can at the regional office level to ensure that those operators that are going to be operating are ready in the spring. So thank you.
Let's see for the reply. Next, I'll put Ms. Knockleby back in the queue. MLA Johnson.
Thank you for the presentation and for the work that you do. I guess I'm wondering, I know we are all here waiting to see whether public health changes the entry requirements and allows fully vaccinated tourists. And I know they are waiting to see what this new variant does. But assuming that happens, does NWT Tourism have a sense based on, I guess, other jurisdictions, whether we will actually get some tourism, or how long it'll take to get any, that Canadian domestic tourism, assuming we allow fully vaccinated tourists in anytime soon. Thank you.
Ms. DeMarc?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Emily Johnson. So from all our indicators on our social channels and from our website and the phone calls and the emails that we receive, we do know that there is a pent-up demand for visitors to come to the Northwest Territories. However, the longer our jurisdiction holds out and is behind the rest of the jurisdictions in Canada and the world, we don't know how long that will stay that way, to be honest. But we do know that there is currently today, we do know that there's a pent-up demand to come to the Northwest Territories. And we also know that many of our operators have held deposits with visitors. Some of them have canceled though recently. And again, the longer we sit in this situation, the longer that becomes more and more of an issue. So, but we do know that and there's competition out there. That's the reality. And we are the only jurisdiction that's in the situation that we're in today. And it's tough to wait to move forward for a lot of our operators. So we hope that we're able to receive visitors shortly while that demand is still there.
I see, Mr. Mark. Ms. St. Denis, have you got anything on this issue? Masi?
Thank you. No, I think Mr. Mark covered it perfectly. Thank you.
All right, Masi. Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, can I perhaps get NWT Tourism to speak to the kind of lead time that different operators would need? I know this was a bit of a concern throughout the pandemic, that if we were going to let visitors in, I know many of the remote tourism operators said they needed months and months to kind of even open their lodge, or, if they have to have a sense of the numbers before they decide to get operating. And I'm just wondering, if you could speak to that, some of the operators, the notice they would need to even consider having a summer season, for example. Thank you.
I'll see Mr. Johnson. Mr. Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Emily Johnson, for that question. I appreciate that. The lead time is significant. A lot of our operators are planning their summer seasons right now. The stress and the tension with our operators to date is been pretty high, but especially right now, because this is when they're looking to hire guides for next summer. This is when they're looking to see what they need for their infrastructure and make all their plans. And their visitors are now looking to try to book flights and so on. So lead time is very important. I guess the one thing we all have going for us right now is that people are a lot more flexible than they have been in the past, because everybody's had to kind of roll with the pandemic. So as much lead time as possible. To be honest with you, November was when a lot of our operators normally start to plan for their next season. And so we're carrying over into that time right now. So as soon as we can let them know that they're able to accept visitors and what those conditions and parameters are, the better.
Let's see. Next I have O'Reilly.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I guess I'd like to hear from NWT Tourism about whether they feel or they can tell me whether operators have identified any gaps in our current supports for tourism that are offered through GNWT. And the reason, I guess, why I'm asking this is I'm aware of operators who have sold their parkas, boots. Aurora World is now a healing camp. I just don't get a sense that we've done enough to support operators, but what sort of gaps remain? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I see Mr. O'Reilly. Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Emily O'Reilly. I think perhaps Ms. St. Denis could speak to this as well, but I am hearing from operators that, I mean, the reality is they're not making any money. Any of the supports is going to basically get them to a zero so that they're not, perhaps, maybe not losing money, but the reality is they're not making money. So, you know, whatever they have to do to continue to live is basically what we're seeing by some of our operators, unfortunately, having to sell off some of their infrastructure and some of their business inventory that is going to allow them to move forward. That's unfortunately reality where they are right now. So do the supports help? Absolutely. If we didn't have them in place, we wouldn't have tourism operators still potentially able to come out of this pandemic. Do we need more? Absolutely. The reality is these people they're not making a living because we don't have anything to allow them to make a living. So that's basically the reality of where we're at. But I'm not sure if perhaps Ms. St. Denis would like to add to that.
Must see, Ms. DeMarc, I guess we, you know, maybe we have to remember from years back, the caribou hunting outfitters, you know, and how much they got hurt because of the declining caribou numbers. So I'd love to hear what ITI has to say on this issue, Masi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to reiterate a couple comments from earlier. We have had a series of programs over the last 18 months, which the department has pivoted to support operators, whether if it was in the beginning with a RIT program, which did assist with purchasing inventory for businesses that wanted to do more focused staycation activities. And then, of course, this fiscal, whether it was the STAR program helping out hotels or PrEP with the with core funding to assist with those core expenses, and then most recently with the opportunity to provide some funding to get operators ready for that next phase. I will let committee know that there is active discussions internally about the next pivot and what does that next pivot mean, as well as having discussions with our federal colleagues to see what additional partnerships we might be able to have. So very much an active discussion within the department, and just would like to thank committee for the question because it is active discussions right now, and look forward to some further updates. Thank you.
Merci, Ms. St. Denis. Mr. O'Reilly?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think I heard that there's going to be some sort of scan done with operators to figure out what they need in terms of getting ready for the upcoming, at least maybe summer season. But have any kind of surveys been done now of operators, or, you know, during the pandemic to kind of get a sense of how many have actually survived and what their needs were, how we design specific support programs, what they need to get prepared for reopening. Has that kind of work actually been done? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Emily O'Reilly. So there was a survey done of the industry in 2020. Unfortunately, that was before I started with NWT Tourism, so I don't have those details right handy at my fingertips. But basically, we know from the work that survey did and some of the work that the GNWT has done that 98% of our industry has reported a loss. So that's reality. We don't have a to date or right now survey, other than the work that I do in that I talk to most of our members on a daily, ongoing basis and ask for input and feedback on pretty much everything it is that we do on all of our advocacy work. We are in touch with a lot of our members on a very, very regular basis. And we do have, like I mentioned, a survey going out. It'll likely be within the first to second week of January.
Okay.
Hi, Mussy, for that. Ms. Knockleby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think early on in the presentation, I heard the comment that NWT Tourism is both the industry association and the destination marketing organization, which we said was unusual in Canada to hold both those roles. I do understand that because we're so small, sometimes that's what happens. Can maybe Ms. DeMarc speak to whether or not that actually helps us? Does that hinder us? Does that mean we have less people advocating for us? I guess just want to get a better understanding if there's a need for those to be separate, or does it actually make sense to have them together? Thank you.
Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, MLA Knockleby. That's a great question, a huge question. I actually think I've had an opportunity over the last year to work with my counterparts across the country, and I actually think it works. It works for us. I really think that it works for the Northwest Territories. I think our marketing is better because of it, and I think that we have a really fantastic and unique board that really works well for the advocacy of our industry. I do know that there is one other jurisdiction in Canada that is looking at us as perhaps going to this same model, and I believe that it actually works for our operators quite well.
Ms. Knockleby?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I can see the point there too. Sometimes, particularly if you're working with people that really just want to get somebody in their boat and go fishing with them, they don't want to be jumping through numerous hoops and different organizations to deal and sort of repeating themselves. So I would agree that that does seem to make sense here. My last question, I guess, is just around, there was the comment about conference tourism. I've long believed, as somebody coming from the private sector, how much of this is sort of an untapped market, and obviously one you're aware of. I would meet people who would be buying diamonds for their spouses, or, oh, I'm going to come back up with my children to experience this. So I do think that's a great way for us to move forward. And however, I'm just wondering, again, back sort of to what my colleague asked, how prepared are we for the return of a conference type tourism situation? Do we need to be building better centers now? I know at one point the YKN was looking to expand their conference areas in the mall. I'm just wondering if there are any plans around better conference facilities. I'm very pleased with the Explorers changes to their Katimavik rooms, and the addition of that extra room has helped so much. So I'm just curious if they could speak a little more to that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. That's another great question, Emily Knockleby. I appreciate that. I'm going to actually let Joel, our marketing director, answer that question.
Thank you, Donnelly. Yeah, I think it is. You speak to an interesting point about it being untapped. I think when you look at that data that says 38% of our visitor spend comes from business travel, there's a huge opportunity for us to market to a business traveller. So that's kind of one conversation. And the affiliate businesses like buying diamonds, buying arts, buying food, all those things can really benefit. And us convincing the business traveller just to stay one extra day, especially when you talk about regional travel and even business travel within the territory, there's huge opportunities at many levels there. So that's one conversation, and we're definitely very much focused on that. We've got lots of ideas that can speak a lot to it. Around the conference and event space, I would say, are we ready? Absolutely, we're ready to host events. I know there'll probably be challenges in staffing, but we've got some amazing venues across the territory already. There's definitely an opportunity to have more of these events and some better venues. I won't speak to the infrastructure requirements there. Maybe Donnelly or Tracy could. But, we do have some amazing venues that we get to promote. And I think it's a space that, We were lucky just before the pandemic. It was one of the last things we did. We actually hosted Business and Events Canada, the Destination Canada arm of the Business and Events Travel in the Territory, and actually flew out to Divik Diamond Mine and did a tour that was being set up there. And they were just enthralled. They had one of their board meetings out at the Divik Diamond Mine there, and they thought it was an amazing thing to offer, and they were thrilled at the experience. They had dinner at Aurora Village, and the whole team was very excited about marketing the Territory. So I think we have a lot to offer in that space, and I'm really excited about it. But it will be a slow burn.
Yeah, I think you touched on it all, Joel. It's a great answer. Thank you.
All right, next I have Ms. Wayland Armstrong.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a good presentation. I see on your presentation tourism coordinator, and I just wanted to know if that tourism coordinator goes out to the region, to the small communities, to promote or start up a small business to promote tourism industry. Because I see on here, North Slave region, there's 77 members, and it's mostly in Yellowknife, but nothing in Klitschko regions. I guess Klitschko region is lumped into the North Slave. Thank you.
Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that question. So I'm gonna start, and then I'm just gonna hand it off to Tracy, because this is, Mr. St. Denis, because this is the area of expertise. We're very fortunate in that our partners, we get to work with the regional tourism officers and the community tourism coordinators, which ITI has funded, I believe, 5 more in this last budget. So there's 7 community tourism coordinators, and they've had a huge impact on our work, and I think will have a huge impact on the a direct correlation to operators going forward. So, but I'm going to pass it off to Ms. St. Denis and let her speak to this.
Ms. St. Denis? Is ITI still with us?
Maybe if I could just, it looks like actually Tracy maybe has fallen off the call, but I'll just mention that there are regional tourism officers in the 5 regions, and we do a lot of work with them, and they are tireless in their efforts at promoting their regions. And then, like I mentioned before, the community tourism coordinators, which there's 7 right now, and that is a fairly new process and a fairly new role in a lot of these communities. And we can see there's a ton of advantage to having them in those regions. And we really, really hope, like we said, that we see a direct correlation in operator development going forward. Our space is not development or funding. Our space is marketing and advocacy. So that's really ITI's space.
Hi, Mussy, for that answer. We're still waiting for ITI to get back on or find out where they've gone to, because that was an important question for the member from Mafwi. Ms. Wayland Armstrong, you've got another question?
Yes. Yeah, because I think she said, well, even though, she's with the NWT Tourism. So I just want to know if St. Denis, she's back on? Is she back on? Okay.
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Maybe she can answer.
Okay, Ms. St. Denis, I'll get Ms. Wayland Armstrong to repeat her question, the first one. Go ahead, Jane.
Okay. Well, In the presentation, it did say that they have tourism coordinator. And I just want to know if the tourism go out to the regions to promote or to help the community members in the small communities to start up a business or to promote tourism industry, working with the community members. And I think, yes, that's okay. Thank you.
All right, Ms. St. Denis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. The member is correct. We actually do have tourism development officers in all 5 of our regions. On top of that, we also have community transfer initiative positions, so EDO positions that actually work in communities that help promote tourism and other business ideas and the ITI programming. So specifically with the Clecho, we actually have an arrangement with the Clecho government where we provide funding for positions in each one of those communities. A program that was started under Tourism 2020 that continued with Tourism 2025 is the ability for communities to apply for community tourism coordinators to actually have those positions in their own department, in their own community. And we were fortunate enough this year to provide funding for 7. And if the committee is interested, I can follow up with the actual communities that applied and where the funding was provided. But we do have a variety of people in the communities, whether it's at the community level or at the regional level, helping operators, because at the end of the day, we're all very keen to see more operators because we know tourism is a great opportunity for all 33 of our communities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci for that. Jane, you got any further second question?
Thank you. Yes, the reason why I asked is that North Slave, there's 77 members, and it's mostly in Yellowknife. And in the Clecho regions, I guess they lump us into the North Slave. So, that was the reason why I asked. And if there is people out there, because I don't think there's anybody who started a tourism industry in Bichico or in any of the Clecho communities. So I don't know what they're doing, but I just want to know if NWT Tourism is keeping track or to find out, what these, if there's any tourism business started or anything like that, because I don't see any activities in my regions. That was the reason why I asked that question. Thank you.
Merci, Ms. Whale and Armstrong. Well, Tourism NWT, you've got a plea for assistance. Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Giselle Marion is the Clecho rep that sits on our board of directors, and so she also is involved in the tourism world and in the tourism sector in that region. I am not aware of a specific operator in the Clecho right now, but I do know that we hope we welcome, if we could have 77 operators in every community, we would be extremely happy because that gives us more to market. And I'm just gonna Joel's just gonna add to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing that we have been promoting, and where there's perhaps an absence of tourism operator license holders and operators to promote, we really focus on what other things that may be there for tourists, other infrastructure or other ways for tourists to leave money behind, essentially. And one of the things we have promoted in the Clecho region, in Bichico specifically, is the art store and the online store there. So we've done some work in that space, I know, and in the last couple of years, but it's been hard during the pandemic, no doubt.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, merci for that. Yeah, so when you guys go into the communities, I guess we should be promoting more of the tourism initiatives and, besides the lovely art store that you mentioned. But I'm going to give, since Jane is a new member, we give her lots of leeway. You got another question, Jane? Masi?
Well, I think I'm going to email ITI regarding the tourism in Clearwater region. And it's just, it's good. I think I would like to see more tourism, in the regions, not just in my regions, but in in all the regions, because it just seems like everything is in Yellowknife. We have the Western Arctic, Satu, and Deschaux, and it's not lots within that area. So I would like to see more in the regions. And it's good they're taking some courses here and there, but I think we should be doing more now that pandemic. Hopefully it's going to be over soon, and so that's it would be nice. It would be good to see. I would like to see that, to see the NWT in all the regions, promote more tourism industry in the regions. Thank you.
Merci for that. I'll start with Ms. DeMarc, and then we'll have Ms. St. Denis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, MLA with Alan Armstrong. I appreciate your comments. I, as well, would like to see more tourism operators in the regions, and I believe that the Northwest Territories has a really unique opportunity in that we have product that the world is looking to see. And I think that the more operators that we have across the Northwest Territories, the better it will be for all of the Northwest Territories. And as Ms. St. Denis mentioned earlier, tourism opportunity in all 33 of our communities, and there's not another resource out there that can be said about. So I'm 100% on the same page as you, and I believe that ITI is as well. And I'm going to pass it off to Ms. St. Denis so she can respond to that.
Yep, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and agree absolutely with everything that's been said so far. We can commit to provide the member with information that the North Slave Office has done with the Clearwater community, specifically with Nwt and some training that's occurred. Also agree that it's not just the Clearwater region. To the member's point, it's about having more operators across the Northwest Territories. We were very fortunate to work with Litzel K with the development of Taidenenene. We saw an increase in tourism operator licenses. Tourism 2025 is a strategy that we released earlier this year, and one of its pillars is about having more tourism outside of Yellowknife and having more operators involved with the sector. So agree with the comment that now that we're moving out of the pandemic stage, hopefully into an endemic stage, that having training and in-person sessions about how to start a tourism business will happen again. So appreciate the question and the confirmation that we're all on the same page, that there's some real opportunities moving forward. And for us and as a department, Tourism 2025 is the guiding document for us. Thank you.
Merci for the great comments to the question. Next, I have Mr. O'Reilly.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So I know that Mr. Johnson asked a question about lead times and so on, and I guess this kind of might build on that, but I guess I'm wondering about how the communications guidance from both the CPHO and GNWT in terms of COVID compliance enforcement has worked for the tourism sector, and whether what you're looking for now. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I believe that question is being directed at ITI. We'll let ITI go first, and then if any comments by NWT Tourism. Let's see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've actually had a very good working relationship with the COVID Secretariat, and then the precursor to that with staff that were working out of the MACA office. We are in close communication with them, and they do keep us apprised as there's been updates. And I'll let Donna Lee talk about her relationship, realizing that the CPHO obviously is looking at science and numbers, and we're all very hopeful that there'll be some updates shortly. As have been alluded to. But anyway, I don't want to take any of Donnelly's thunder, so over to NWTT to talk about their relationship, but can confirm that there has been good internal communication with the CPHO office and their comms team, their communications team, and our communications team. Thank you.
Donna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, MLA O'Reilly. I want to assure you that the communications have been many with the COVID Secretariat and NWT Tourism and the Office of the Chief Public Health Officer. Do we always agree? No. But we definitely have been working together throughout this. A perfect example of that is this past summer, we were able to get the remote tourism operations plan put in place for 26 of our operators to be able to host visitors from outside of the Northwest Territories. It wasn't all of our operators, and that's difficult, and it's difficult for the operators that didn't qualify for that remote tourism operations under that remote tourism operations plan. However, we do work very closely together. We do work very closely with our communications teams, and they keep us involved when they can. Not everything, unfortunately, can be shared, but what can be, we absolutely work together, and we will continue to work together and hopefully have some good news to share shortly.
Merci for that. Follow up, Mr. O'Reilly?
No, that's it. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Alrighty. Since there's no further questions from committee, I'll take I think I've got maybe one or two. I'm just wondering about the board makeup, your board members. I know your slide, I just couldn't get back to it. You showed two different slides with two different sets of board members. I'm not sure if you have two different sets or whether they're all the same. And if they're elected positions or if they're appointed, and then how long do they serve on the boards before you seek expressions of interest, and if you've ever reached out to have a regional representation from the different regions, Masi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for your question. So we have 16 board members. They all serve on the board at the same time, one board. 7 of them are elected from the membership. And 7 of them are appointed from the 7 Indigenous governments. So we've identified 7 Indigenous governments that they appoint a board member to our board. Sorry, one of those seats is also always a GNWT ITI representative. Currently, it's Ms. St. Denis. And then one is always at the board discretion. It could be a past board chair, or like it is right now, it's a representative from Parks Canada. So there's 16 of our 16 members on our board, and they serve for 2 years. Quite often, depending on the Indigenous government, sometimes they like to have the continuity, so they will reappoint that member again. So we do have, for example, our vice chair is Jerry Kassoon, and he's been on the board for several years. And we really like having him on the board as well. So I think that answers, I hope that answered all your questions on that one.
Masi, for a lot of that. That's interesting to note. 16 members, 7 elected, 7 appointed from Indigenous governments. I don't know how the other 7 are elected, since we have many tourism operators that live in the south or from the south.
They're elected. Sorry, I apologize.
Okay.
They're elected from the membership, so someone nominates them from the membership, so they have to be members of NWT Tourism to be on the board. And then if another member nominates them, they agree to run, and then our membership votes on them to be on the board.
Was there a reason why 7 are elected and 7 aren't?
We're just looking to have a balance, try and have as much balance and as much coverage of the Northwest Territories and the sector as possible. Sectors.
Okay, Mussy, for that. You mentioned Indigenous governments. My first question included whether you have regional representation from the different regions and stuff like that. I'm just wondering who you're referencing when you just say Indigenous governments, Mussy.
Yeah, so on the Indigenous governments that we have, sorry, I should put my glasses on so that I'm giving you the exact right information. So we have the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation, Northwest Territories Métis Nation, Dehcho First Nations, Sahtu Secretariat, Acacho Territory Government, Pleacho Government, Gwich'in Tribal Council. Those are the 7 Indigenous government representatives.
Okay, I'm not sure any were missing there. So I didn't hear anything from the Pleacho government or their representatives.
Giselle Mary is the Pleacho government representative, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Perhaps just another one. I noticed in your slide, you talked about Indigenous tourism. Is there what are the parameters or what's happening around that? Mussy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will let Joel, our marketing director, speak to that.
Yeah, so there's the national body, the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. They're similar to us actually in the fact that they're a member-based organisation as well as a destination marketing organisation, and their brand, which is fairly new, is actually Destination Indigenous as a national destination, so to speak. I think they're a wonderful organisation and we work quite closely with them to market. Now, to be a member of the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada, you have to prove 51% Indigenous ownership. And so that's how they verify membership. And there's board members from all provinces and territories in Canada. Joe Bailey from North Star Adventures is the board member currently on the ITAC board nationally. And then we work with members that are both members of NWT Tourism and the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada to market Indigenous tourism, and really going by the slogan that Indigenous tourism is Indigenous tourism by Indigenous people rather than about Indigenous people, and that's kind of the credence that they run by. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Chair.
Hey, Mussy, for that clarification. That sounds great. I think we all know Mr. Joe Bailey from North Star Adventures, who had just recently gone to Ottawa for that ITEC meeting. Seeing that there's no further questions from committee, I would like to thank ITI and especially the NWT Tourism staff for their presentation today, which is very much appreciated, and fielding all our questions, which is equally appreciated. This concludes the public portion of our meeting. We just ask the committee stay online. Any closing comments from NWT Tourism? Mussy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again, I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you. If any of the committee members have any questions or would like any further information, please reach out. There is our website, Spectacular NWT website, but we also have a member website. So if you wanted to get some more information on our members or our organization, we have that information there. But just a reminder to please check out our website, check out our stories. Make sure you click on those videos the video links that we shared with you, because they really truly are spectacular. I've been a resident of the NWT for a really long time, and I get goosebumps every time I watch them, even though I've watched them well over 20 times each. So they're pretty amazing. And yeah, that's it. Just thank you very much for your time.
Merci for that. Ms. St. Denis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's just a great opportunity to share with committee today the important partnership with NWT Tourism. Being a tourism chamber and being able to work with them about their membership's concerns, and at the same time, congratulate them on the great work that they do around the marketing. Has been an absolute pleasure to work with them over these challenging times. I know our staff at the regional level and at headquarters really value the relationship. So thank you to committee for allowing us to share this relationship and an update. Thank you.
I'll see to you both. Our committee certainly will be in touch as tourism is near and dear to our heart and for the business people of the Northwest Territories. I'd like to thank you all for your presentations and being with us today. So this will conclude the public portion of our meeting. We just ask committee to stay on the line as we have other business to look after. Masi. Mr.
Thank
Clerk.
you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you all.